Tell me a little about yourself. This is the most commonly asked question in job interviews around the world, and today I'm going to give you the best script for answering it. Hi, how are you? I'm Romulo Gutierrez. This is the Job Room channel. This question comes up in about 91% of interviews for all positions everywhere in the world. It's the first question in the interview. And I usually say that making a good impression right at the start of your interview is one of the key factors to getting approved in any selection process. And I'm going to give you the tips you need to achieve this effect. First essential tip, use the technique I call 30-70 or 70-30. What does that mean? If this question is asked by the Human Resources Department, you should focus first on 70% behavioral topics, things about yourself, and 30% on technical topics. So let me give you an example. I'm applying for a position as a sales manager. So if HR is asking, 70% of my answer should be about personal and behavioral topics, and 30% should be technical. So I could say, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. My name is Romulo Gutierrez. I'm someone who is passionate about life and nature. I really love the ocean. I live in Brazil with my family. I have 2 daughters, Ana Clara and Carolina. I'm also Nadine's husband. She's been with me for 15 years. We enjoy simple things, like watching a good series and spending hours together. Then I move on to the professional part. Professionally, I've been a sales manager for 2 years. I'm a specialist in client development and developing new suppliers. In the past 3 years, I've always managed to meet my targets as a sales manager, and I appreciate the opportunity to interview. So I'm going to use my 2 or 3 minutes to answer. If it's with HR, I'll spend about 70% of the time not sharing anything too personal, but talking about myself as an individual, as a person, and the other 30% discussing technical matters. If this question in the interview is asked by the department manager or the technical lead, then it's the other way around. Then you'll have to do the opposite. So it'll be 70%, right? Or rather, 30% personal and 70% technical. If it's with the manager for the same department and the same position. For example, I'm Romulo Gutierrez. I'm 45 years old, married. I have 2 daughters, and I'm passionate about life. Professionally, I work as a sales manager, and then I start to develop the whole professional side. That way you can balance it really well. What happens a lot, and it's very common, is that some people pass the behavioral interview but don't get approved. They fail in the interview with the manager because they don't make this adaptation. Second key tip for answering this question, and at the end, I'll give you a complete script, so keep this in mind. Always speak for 2 to 3 minutes. Job interviews around the world, and I study this. I'm an academic professor in the field, as well as a recruiter for 27 years. On average, interviews last about 20 to 25 minutes at most. So some candidates, when asked about you, they get excited and can't stop talking. And then they end up answering for 5 or 6 minutes, and the recruiter or manager still has 6 more questions to ask. The time will run over and you won't get approved. So, tip, speak for 2 to 3 minutes. As I said, mix in personal aspects, mix in professional aspects, and also when answering this question about yourself, it's really great to show some point of connection you have with the position, okay? Besides introducing yourself personally and giving your professional introduction, remember, if it's HR, you should spend 70% of the time on personal matters and 30% on professional ones. If it's the technical manager, it's the opposite, 30% personal and 70% professional. At the end of your answer, just mention in 1 sentence why you applied for that position. When you finish your introduction, since I used the example of the sales manager or commercial manager position, I could say at the end of my introduction, and this position made a lot of sense to me because, for example, I noticed that I'll be working with challenging numbers and will be involved in selling mobile technology devices, which is something I really enjoy. That's why I applied for this position, and thank you for the opportunity to interview. Finish talking about yourself by mentioning 1 or 2 points that connect you to the position. Now let's move on to the third tip. There are 7 in total. Before I continue, do you want to simulate a job interview? practice a job interview live and online, get feedback on whether you did well or not. This WhatsApp number that's on the screen is also in the video description and in the first comment. You can reach out to me. The prices are low for subscribers of the Job Room channel. There's no shortage of videos here, and they never disappoint. There are new videos every Wednesday. Every Wednesday, I post a new video. I need your like, and I need you to subscribe. Let's move on to the fourth tip. A lot of people, a lot of candidates end up confusing this question about, tell me about your professional journey. One thing is the question, tell me about yourself, and another is talking about your professional journey. There are candidates all over the world who, unfortunately, end up failing the interview because of, tell me about yourself. And the candidate says, well, I started working at Scania, where I was an intern in the electrical department, and I worked on activities X, Y, Z, W. Then I finished my engineering degree and got promoted. So he didn't say anything about himself. He only talked about his professional journey. And automatically, this leads to rejection for two reasons. First, because of the inability to listen and pay attention to what is actually being asked. And second, no matter how technically prepared a candidate is, the department manager or recruiter likes to know a little more about the person themselves. So the question about your professional journey is usually asked. There are videos here on the Job Room channel explaining all of this, but you shouldn't mix up the questions. Third factor, actually fifth factor, to be more accurate, I got the number wrong. Fifth factor, to be more precise for you to answer this question well. Also, make sure to do a brief study of the job postings keywords. For every interview you go to, it's very important to get the job description, read it carefully, and literally circle the keywords in the posting. I recommend picking 2, 3, or even 4 words that you identify as the core competencies for that position. Always do this in any job interview. Why is that? During the interview, you'll face the challenge of fitting those words into your answers, explaining your expertise in those areas, which in reality aren't just words, but the actual competencies. And if you can bring this up in the tell me about yourself question, which is the first question in 91% of interviews, it will be fantastic. Let me give you an example. I'm applying for a position where I'll be working as a school principal, a school director, and I noticed that I'll be responsible for ensuring an increase in student enrollment. I read here in the job description, increasing student enrollment and reducing student dropout rates. During the tell me about yourself part, for example, let's say HR is the one asking me this question, the human resources department. When I've talked about 70% about myself as a person, and I'm about to talk about the other 30%, I'll say, as a school principal, I've been working for 3 years, and I've always been praised for 2 things. First, everywhere I've worked, I've always managed to reduce the student dropout rate at the school. At the last school where I worked, we had a dropout rate close to 30%, and today the school has a dropout rate below 8%, which was the result of the teamwork I was able to develop with my team. Never alone, always as a team. And then there's the other aspect, which is the commercial side, bringing in new students. At the second to last school where I worked, we started out with only 150 students, and through strong commercial efforts that I led together with my team, my commercial team as well, while I was the school principal, we managed to double that number of students in just 6 months. So I can definitely help you. Look, I associate myself with the keywords from the job posting. This works really well when answering the tell me about yourself question. Okay? What else? All right. If you happen to be doing a group interview, which has become very common after the pandemic, well, the online world was already wide open, but we learned even more about the conveniences of working online. Many interviews are conducted via video call, and some of them are group interviews. And this question is definitely going to come up. So the tip I'll give you is, first of all, don't just repeat what others are saying. You need to have your own answer, your own script, your own structure, just like I'm explaining here. Many candidates end up listening to one answer and just following along like a herd mentality, where everyone goes in the same direction to the same place. That's not a good strategy, okay? And as I told you, I'd give you a complete script. If I were to do an introduction about myself, I basically say first name, last name, then age is optional. Then I can mention my personal descriptors, in other words, what I'm like. I can talk about my hobbies. I can quickly mention a little about my family. I can explain why the position makes sense for me. And then, yes, I briefly talk a bit about my professional background, connecting it to the keywords from the job posting. If you do that, everything will work out. And to complement this content, I've left a video right here with the 10 most common questions in job interviews. Go check it out. Great preparation. Take care and see you next time. Bye-bye.